Welcome to Command and Control, a podcast series about military command and the control measures used to orchestrate combat engagements and wars. In this mini-series over the summer of 2026, we're looking at the future of US C2. Not JADC2 or CJADC2 or even Joint Command, but rather an in-depth look at each of the US military services and their aspirations. This is important and timely, right? Big changes are coming for each service and they differ from each other and the way they've historically organised their C2 too. In this episode, we're talking about the US Army with General James Mingus, recently retired as Vice Chief of Staff of the US Army.
At Systematic Incorporated, we provide innovative commercial C2 software solutions. Our SID-aware suite of products accelerates decision-making in contested environments and enables data sharing with partners and allies. Our open platform uses public APIs to connect sensors, shooters, autonomous systems, and mission applications without the need to replace existing hardware.
The US Army has been going through a seismic series of changes. Not only is recapitalization of major platforms underway, but the way of fighting, as well as the theatre of focus, is also changing. No more short, sharp wars, no more counterinsurgency or counterterrorism missions. The major drive for the US Army is preparing for whatever happens between great powers. And the Pacific, with its own peculiar geography, now sits at the centre of the contingency basket. Many listeners may be aware of this thing called Next Generation Command and Control, or NGC2, an initiative that is the US Army's top modernisation priority and moves away from platform-centric systems to a data-centric, software-designed architecture. It's become synonymous with the idea of MDO, itself a US Army-generated concept as multi-domain battle all those years ago. But before we get into that technical stuff, I want to introduce my guest today. General James Mingus has recently retired as Vice Chief of Staff of the US Army. No one gets their 4-star without qualifying in just about every way possible, and Jim Mingus is no exception. Starting in the National Guard in 1981, he commissioned 4 years later. Originally a second lieutenant with the Field Artillery, he switched to the infantry in 87 on becoming active duty. Serving in Germany with 3ID, later in the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, and after that in the 75th Ranger Regiment, a tour at JSOC, command of a Ranger Regiment, and command of a BCT from 4ID, including a combat tour in Afghanistan. Indeed, Jim deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan a total of 12 times in his career. In 2013, he ran the Commander's Action Group in CENTCOM before returning to 4ID as the Depuy Commanding General for Manoeuvre. Service at the Pentagon and on the Joint Staff rounded out his career, becoming Vice Chief of Staff of the US Army in 2023. Intermingled with all that is the usual staff, education and training appointments that make a full career just what it is. I should now say that all remarks made by General Mingus today are his own views, do not represent those of the US military, the US Joint Staff, the Pentagon, the Departments of Defense, War, or the US Army. General, hearty welcomes to the show. Congratulations on your retirement and thanks for your service. You're probably the one soldier who can explain the C2 of the US Army today in terms of its per person from top to bottom. So can we start there as a sort of leveler for everyone, bring everyone up to the same speed? What makes up the US Army's command and control today? I guess how much has that changed and how is it changing again?
Well, thanks, Peter, and thanks for having me. I appreciate what you're doing as part of this broader effort to get the word out. But to your first and fundamental question, command and control, most people inside the military immediately gravitate towards the network. And the network is critical to command and control, but command and control is a warfighting function. There's 7 joint functions inside the Army. There are 6 warfighting functions, from intel to movement, maneuver, fires, etc., of which command and control is one of those. And command and control is, if you look at most of your logic diagrams, sits at the center because it integrates and it synchronizes all the other warfighting functions that are out there. And it what sets Western militaries apart from all others in our ability to execute combined arms maneuver, which is a very sophisticated and difficult thing to do at the highest end. But command and control kind of sit at the center of that. Command is pretty easy to get your head around. It is the inherent right authority of a commander within an organization, regardless of echelon, to direct, to command, to task, to prioritize things that happen within that organization. Where it becomes sophisticated and difficult is in the control, because the control is the people It's the infrastructure, I think command posts, and there's many types of command posts, whether it's in a maritime or air or land domain. It's the processes or doctrine, so the planning processes. And pulling all that together is the network. The network is the piece that allows for mission command, which is the way we fight. So you have command and control, the warfighting function. Mission command is the way in which we fight. For all that to work and the network to keep it together, trust is one of the principal essence that comes out of mission command, and the network is what holds that kind of together. But I thought it'd be important, if we're going to talk about command and control, instead of immediately going into the network, to kind of start with what command and control is.
Can I just start that? Because everyone loves a bit of mission command. They all love talking about it. It's a core ethos, as you said, of sort of Western militaries, armies in particular. I think more than anywhere else, you see mission command exercise, as we understand it, in land domain forces more than any other. I'm always fascinated to see how much you think that survived, or has that concept changed since you started? Like way back in 81, you went through Great Power Competition, you went through the Cold War, you went through this sort of interregnum between Great Power Competition periods where we did coin and CT and smart and short and light and fast and all that other stuff. And now we're back into heavily technology enabled, software enabled warfare that we talk about today. Do you think mission command has changed? Has it shifted in your view?
It has. For years, we didn't call it mission command, but as we transitioned from active passive defense of Europe and the type of environment that we grew up in the Cold War to air-land battle, which ultimately led to the demise and what allowed us to walk away from the Cold War, was the notion of mission tactiques, which is really a German concept, where purpose overrides task. In any mission for any organization, there's a task and a purpose, the what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. The U.S. military and what most Western militaries adopted the purpose over task, because if I task a company in a battalion formation to seize a hill for the purpose of X, Y, or Z, if conditions change and we in the execution, maybe it's not this hilltop, it's that hilltop, and you can make that decision to change in the course of execution because you understand the broader purpose, because you're tied to something bigger than yourself. And so purpose over task has always been, since the late 80s, early 90s, been a critical piece of this. As that evolved, and I think if memory serves, it was Marty Dempsey who really started to kind of bring about the notion of mission command, which is trust. It's this purpose over in a more formalized way. Where we probably went too far is we took mission command and replaced command and control as the function and tried to make it all things, versus what it really was is the how we fight, which is more important. So eventually in about, I want to say 2017, 2018 timeframe, we brought command and control back as the warfighting function. Mission command is the way we fight. And so that's been probably the biggest evolution of it. But mission command is still here to stay, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, all the discussions I've had about MDO and JADC2 and networks is there's a lot of talk about drawing much more of the authority and decisions to a higher level, to a higher echelon, someone who has more information about the campaign and devolves less responsibility down so that they can shape the entirety of the battle space as it goes along. It's a beautiful view. I'm always struck, though, by both the experiences in Ukraine and those that the IDF had, both in Lebanon and Gaza, about the fog of war still permeates. It doesn't matter how good your network is. Sometimes the fog of war is still there. Mission command as an underlying philosophy that allows troop commanders to go forward, execute a task, is still fundamental to everything. The fog of war doesn't go away because of technology, right? I mean, that's their experience. Do you see that changing?
No, I don't. I mean, kind of going back to this, if you look at the principles or the tenets of mission command, mission type orders, clear commander's intent, all the things that go with it, ultimately resulting in trust throughout a formation, but disciplined initiative. Really the way to think about disciplined initiative, your illustration of Russia, Ukraine, and people doing what is necessary to accomplish. I think a better way to understand it is informed initiative, because discipline can imply constraint versus what you really want. And that is when a soldier is out there and they look around, and if they understand what the mission is 2 levels up into their left and right, and they are informed of what is the broader goal of an organization, then the initiative that they take is going to be more in line with that broad left and right limits of a commander's intent.
So I get that. The one thing that strikes me about it, going back to your first comment, is how you said C2 sits at the center. And I think when lots of people externally think about C2, they think of hierarchical organizations. They think of flow charts, the commander sitting at the top and he's delegating then to his corps commander, his divisions, his staff. Under the divisions, you've got the BCTs or the brigades or regiments and support. They don't think about it as the central part. They think about it as a cascade down. But actually that cascade, the sort of C2 leading everything, is very much a sort of Soviet German model. It's quite far from the Western way of executing stuff, which was commander goes to his forward HQ and starts executing, and the boys at the back are just supporting, but it's devolved. It's commanded at the front by people at the front rather than anything else. And it's interesting the way you talk about C2 being at the center, because it changes the way you think about C2 philosophically.
Well, I can remember, to quote Stan McChrystal, when he was one of my commanders back in the mid-2000s at the height of the counterterrorism fight, he came up with the notion of flat and agile. How do we become faster? Because we got to be faster than the adversary. We got to have a network to defeat a network. All the things that he put in place there within the command that we were part of. But I remember him making a comment one day. He goes, imagine if everybody in this command had the same level of knowledge and understanding and love access to information that I did all the time. How fast we could be operating inside of my intent. So ironically, when I went to the War College, I wrote my thesis on how to develop flat and agile organizations. And I took the premise behind that. And if you can imagine a big giant arrow that represents commander's intent, and inside the center of that is a circle called an authority boundary. Everybody inside of any given organization has a duty description. You have a duty description. When I was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, if you look at one of the founding documents, it says here's what the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army is supposed to do, but it's very, very narrow. If everybody in any given organization, military or outside the military, only did what was inside of their duty description, there wouldn't be a lot of initiative and there wouldn't be a lot of things that got done. If you create the right environment around the climate, the culture, the identity, the communication, what we reward, how we treat people, people feel like they can be bold, they will operate outside that little tiny duty description and what I called in my thesis, the expanded authority boundary, out to the left and right limits of that intent. And that's when an organization becomes powerful, when everybody is doing that. And that's the essence, in my mind, of what Mission Command is about.
And this next generation C2, NGC2, this network, this system of systems, I mean, you'll have to tell me what it is, because I don't think I quite understand. But that's the sort of network that gets you to this state of an organization that can operate right at the edges of its envelope, right, of its authority's envelope.
So going back to the essence of the network and how it ties this all together and why it is so important to command and control, to Mission Command. When an organization is given a mission, and it starts with just in the cognitive hierarchy, the data components, you've been given a bunch of data that you have to turn into information, which turns into knowledge, which turns into understanding. And then eventually an organization has shared understanding. In the military decision-making process, that happens through a series of steps where we do mission analysis, and then we develop courses of action, and we war game those courses of action, and we rock drill them, and we rehearse them, and then we get ready to go to execute. And before you step across that line of departure to go execute a mission, an organization generally has very good shared understanding from the highest echelon all the way down to the private. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what my role is because I've done all the processes correctly. But the minute you cross that line of departure, that shared understanding begins to degrade, which goes back to trust. After you've gone for a period of time, it's not that I don't trust, or individuals in an organization don't trust each other as people, but do they, because we've been disconnected, we are no longer physically together, do we all have access to the same information all the time, continuously, to maintain the level of trust, which comes back to this network and why it is so important, because that's what's going to maintain that shared understanding. And we can come back to this if you want, but artificial intelligence, agentic AI, and tools that are going to help keep us in that cognitive hierarchy at a much higher level is also going to be a critical part of maintaining shared understanding, which is going to allow us to be faster than our adversary.
I will come back to agentic and AI and the part it plays, because I think that's a part of it. NGC2 as a program, though, is that just the network? Is it the systems? Is it the computers? What is it? Because it's like a future vision, right? It's the next generation. We're not there yet. There's some way to go before the US Army gets there. There's something before that, the C2 fix. But NGC2, is that the network? Is it a series of wires? Is it radios? What is it?
When we first started writing the documents for CJAD-C2, Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control, in the Army, our version of that is Next Gen Command and Control. It is not going to be a singular box or thing that comes out on the other end. And from year to year, based on how tech and technology is rapidly changing, it won't be the same from year to year, whatever that solution is. But if you go back 10, 15 years, we in the military had multiple bespoke, standalone, independent battle command systems that were never designed to operate together. And most of them were organized along those warfighting functions. We had one for maneuver, we had one for fires, we had one for air defense, we had one for intelligence. And we figured out ways through cross-domain solutions on how to make all that stuff talk and work together, but it was not done in a seamless way, which created tremendous complexities in our network and cost, and keeping things upgraded was very, very challenging. Next Gen Command and Control and CJAD-C2, the premise behind that is to converge and collapse all that into a single architecture that boils down into its simplest forms. You have a data layer. You have to have the ability to move that data, i.e. the transport. And inside that transport, there's beyond line of sight, high capacity beyond line of sight, low capacity, so there's data exchange rates. Then you have compute and store, the physical components of a network. And then you have the operating system, software, and now AI and user interface that sits on top of that. This is Next Gen Command and Control is converging that all into a singular stack. At the very top of it, the thing that the soldier will interact with are applications versus stovepipes, but just simple software applications that represents those warfighting functions that naturally integrate with each other.
And how big a change is that? You know, the myriad of systems that are out there for any army, but the US Army is a scale in itself. It has a myriad of systems procured over 50 years that are still operating, that work in their own separate way. Is this just a case of making all sort of data compliant so it can get melded into one thing? Or is this a staged replacement of bits that can do it? Because actually it's quite a complex thing. Across the sheer number of platforms, networks that the US Army has already, is this a big bang, or is this, something about layering the data?
No, it's a big bang.
Wow.
And the premise behind it is all of that entire stack from top to bottom will be software defined, modular open system architecture. And I know we're going to get to interoperability with our partners and allies, but if done correctly, the interoperability components of this, both within inside our own military across all the 5 services within the United States military, but our allies and partners as well. It's a matter of turning access on and off versus making 2 disparate systems have to talk to each other. It's about access to the data and if you've got the right privileges, the right credentials and access and identity, you're going to have access to that data. So it's naturally kind of baked into that.
And in the meantime, on the path to get there, there's this thing called C2 Fix, which I'm assuming starts to move those systems towards this new architecture.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, when this really started with Randy George when he was the chief, and then I helped as I came back as the vice, we knew that we needed to have an interim step to get us to Next Gen Command and Control. And one of the principal ways to do that was to remove complexity at the tactical edge for our companies, our battalions, and our brigade formations. Move to a less secure environment. And when I say less secure, before people get a little excited about that, it's still encryption that is very, very difficult. But the premise behind a secure but unclassified network is that information for a company or a platoon is so perishable that doesn't really need to ride in the secret world. Because the minute you go from unclassified to secret, the handling of that information, the security clearances, it makes everything infinitely more difficult for a tactical formation. You can still secure that information through encryption without having to be on a secret classified network. So that was one of the other principal things that we did with C2 Fix and the integrated tactical network, was to remove a lot of the necessity to have classified networks, which made for much more easy of passing of information.
One of the things that I've heard, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, and I thought this was striking, was that demand signal for this stuff is happening at divisional level and not coming out from Department of the Army, which I think is brilliant in terms of a soldier on the ground, a war fighter, the person at the front, the logistician, the sustainment guy, the maintenance, the engineer. Everyone would love this. It's coming from the division, which is sort of, a cynic would say, it's the last step of soldiers before you get to higher staff devolved from the fight. The one thing that struck me was that's brilliant. You got a myriad of divisions doing this stuff. How do you standardize that stuff? Or is it, in fact, if I've been told wrong, is it driven by Department of the Army and is a cascade thing?
The experimentation and the innovation is happening at the edge, but there still is going to have to be a centralization. So if you go back to, you called it C2 Fix, it really started with the Integrated Tactical Network when I was the director for the Mission Command Center of Excellence, and then later became a division commander. I actually fielded the first integrated tactical network for the Army. We had not removed some of the classification components of that, but we were moving in the direction of C2 Fix. One of the principal end user interfaces is a simple end user phone with what they call TAC software, tactical software, that allows a infantryman or a close combat soldier to be able to see themselves, see the terrain, and see the adversary, and then other devices that may interact with that device that sits literally on their chest. Over time, because we had not standardized, what we ended up with was multiple software baselines for that simple device. So an example of why we stepped back and said, you know what, we do need to baseline so everybody has the same software, because we started having some of the same problems when we had disparate battle command systems. So centralization from a management to make sure the right software and the patches and the cyber vulnerabilities and all that stuff is taken care of does need to be done in one central location. But the ideas, the innovation, do we like it? Do the soldiers actually think they're better, stronger, faster, or more lethal when they have this stuff? That feedback needs to come directly from divisions and below versus sitting in the Pentagon under white lights coming up with this stuff.
Okay, so we've got how it's experimenting. We've got the stuff coming down. We've got C2 Fix moving to NGC2. We've got the architecture. One of the biggest things I struggle with, so in 2003, I went to Iraq with 7th Armored Brigade, stayed there when we handed over to 12th Mechanized Brigade down in Basra and M&D Southeast. The one thing that got me was talking to allies is difficult. I thought it was difficult at sea. Actually, in comparison to land, talking to allies is really easy at sea. Doing it on the land with land systems is really, really difficult. How do allies, how do partners get to be interoperable? How do they access the NGC2, the C2 Fix? What are they going to have to do?
Well, like I said a few minutes ago, I think it is about software-defined modular open system architecture, data standards, establishing that versus telling the UK or Germany what specific kit to buy. Here are the standards associated with it. Yes, we've gone from USB, USB-C to other types of things, but industry a long time ago figured out that I may come up with my own particular end user device, but I still have to be able to connect to other things, either to charge or connect from a Wi-Fi or internet perspective. And so they conform to those standards. When it comes to software defined and data standards, we all collectively have to be able to do that. So it's not a matter of will the two boxes talk to each other. It's just gaining and garnering access to the data itself, which is going to create interoperability in the future.
So it feels like what you're saying is there'll be almost a box, if I think about it in those terms, that does the translation and the passing information between NGC2 and whether you have a Korean national system or a Japanese national system or a NATO system or a Brit national system. But provided they are data compliant, those standards work, then the feed is like you just flick a switch, open, and it becomes like a downloading an app and getting permissions and getting the password, and then you're in and you're off, right?
That's correct. And we can do much of that work. I mean, because occasionally you're going to operate in an environment or as part of an operation that you get a partner or an ally that you've never worked. But whether it's NATO, Five Eyes, our friends and allies in the Pacific, I mean, we generally know who those are. So we can begin to create those data standards with those partners now. And then it's just a matter of gaining access to or not. It's an on-off versus doing integration work after the fact.
It is no small task to sometimes get these permissions and push through. What sort of timeline are we talking about for C2 Fix, NGC2? Because the fight in the Pacific could kick off at any stage. Over in Europe, the Poles and the Estonians would tell you the fight with Russia could kick off at any minute. How quickly do they need to get on board with this stuff, make the changes, start getting their system set up for this?
Well, C2 Fix is across multiple divisions now. Next gen command and control, we are prototyping two different stacks, one with the 4th Infantry Division and one with the 25th Infantry Division. The goal of the plan before I left as the vice was to work through the good, the bad, and not so good engineers on site, making real-time daily updates, software engineers, code writers are physically in both those locations making these improvements and coming to a decision sometime over the course of this next fiscal year. Once the decision is made as to what the decision is going to be, there's a little bit of a shortfall, but the way the budgetary landscape looked when I left is this will almost pay for itself. That this is not going to be probably a money or a production problem. It's just to be a matter of scoping and scaling it across the entire Army, which when you can produce 30 to 60 tanks a year, it takes you a very long time to build it and field a whole new Army full of tanks. This is one of those things that we, on paper, like I said before we left, thought we could do in years, not decades, like a traditional modernization kind of thing.
I mean, that's huge. Just being able to talk about this in years and not generations is I remember the British Army and their idea with Bowman or whatever you wanted to call it. And it was a generational change, the rollout of hardware, the training, the software, the updates, and it took people through their entire careers, moving from an old radio to a new radio system. You're talking about something that evolves at a sort of commercial pace, right?
Yeah. And the other thing that the people were going to be initially very uncomfortable with, but if you were to go out and meet with Pat Ellis or Jay Bartholomew's and 4th ID or 25th ID and look at the kit that they are playing with today, and that's once we make the final down select decision, when I say we, the Army leadership in say 6 months to a year from now, and they begin to field it with the 82nd. It's going to look differently than it did for the stuff that Pat Ellis is working in 4th ID. Because every year, as we all know, form factor gets smaller, compute power gets better, AI tools get more sophisticated, our ability to move data in the transport layer get better and more efficient. And what we don't want to do is decide on something, this complete stack, and then field the same thing every year for the next 20 years like we have historically done. I own a 2017 Toyota Tundra. Someday I'm going to trade that in and get a new truck. And I don't know what year that's going to be. I love my truck. It's great. It runs like new. But when I do get a new truck, I want it to be better than the 2017 truck that I bought. None of us would settle for buying a truck in 2027 that has the same stuff. Like, for example, I didn't have Apple CarPlay in my 2017 one. My next truck, it's going to have Apple CarPlay. And we ought to think about technology and how the network matures in the same way, is that because that stuff is improving all the time, we should never settle for the same level of technology that we did a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
And I guess because you're talking open architecture and software defined and all this good stuff, you're then free to switch between suppliers. You go with the best solution, right? If you're doing an upgrade, it's an over-the-air upgrade. It's a bit like you get an update on your Apple phone and it just flips through, right? You don't care. Provided you trust the core of the system, I don't look at what details they're providing me. I don't look at whatever the update is. I just install it. It's just the next thing on. So you can go for the best. You're not tied to one supplier the whole time.
And we want industry to get better. We want them to come and compete, because in the past, once a vendor locked into a contract, they were there forever. There was no incentive to get better. Now we want everybody to compete every year, and he or she who comes forward with the best is the one that's going to ultimately be the winner. And so I see this as a win-win for industry as well, because it creates a much better environment for them. Another example of how things will look different from year to year, if you were to go to, and Pat is fixing this, but I know our viewers can't physically see me, but I'm holding my phone in my hand right now. And going back to the Droid device, I have an iPhone, but the TAC, the thing that sits on a soldier's chest today, the end user device, is based off of a Droid phone. And there's software that rides on top of it that allows him to see himself, the enemy in the terrain, and other things like small drones, exit feeds, and that sort of thing. That end user device, through a series of cables, is connected to a series of radios that allows for the terrestrial base line of sight transport layer that moves data back and forth to that end user device. That is there today. But I think in the next generation, those radios go away. An end user device is a radio. It sends and receives voice, it sends and receives data, and it sends and receives video. So why would we need to continue to tether that end user device to a traditional either leader radio or man-pack type radio for that terrestrial line of sight transport? It should be an automatic mesh that end user device connects to. So the term that I used before I left this device was pucks on trucks. Anything that moves, anything that flies, it's got a transmitter that is moving that multi-band, multi-wave waveforms around, and the end user device is simply connecting to that to get its data that's moving back and forth. And that's all our soldiers will carry in the future is an end user device.
And no radios, no hardware, no extra, oh goodness, no 8 different types of batteries. I mean, this will be an anathema. Sergeants around the world will be pulling their hair out. No one carrying batteries. And it makes sense, right? We don't carry this stuff in the civilian world. We just carry our phone. Everything works through our phone. It connects with whatever cell is out there. It could connect to satellite. It could connect to Wi-Fi. We don't care. Provided we got the signal, it's just there. And that's the way you see it going, right?
I do. And when you look at the traditional phone end user device, if you were to sign up for Starlink or Starshield or some other PLEO satellite constellation, you typically have to buy an external antenna to pull that signal down. Because a phone, if you made it powerful enough to reach that satellite in and of itself, the battery would not last long enough. I mean, it might be, an hour or two a day, because the number of watts that end user device would have to produce to be able to actually physically touch a satellite efficiently all day long. Well, that's another example. As battery technology improves, I could see in the not too distant future where instead of when you sign up for one of these low Earth orbit commercial satellite or phone service, the need for an external antenna to connect to you, that probably will go away in the very near future as well.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? But listen, Jim, I wanted to just merge a couple of things. We threw in a couple of times, you threw in a couple of times, AI, agentic devices, but also allies. The allies treat AI and agentic agents in very different ways. Militaries in particular have different views on them. I look at Ukraine and the Delta system, the Uber targeting, where they tried a bit of AI with it, they rejected it and needed the human input. You look at the IDF with Lavender and Where's Daddy, the problems they had in Gaza with it. The idea that you get a single staff officer who's got 200 targets to approve, and it's just a case of hit the return key as many times as you can. There is a different idea of trust within the system and trust within AI and agentic agents. Do you coalesce those two things and say a trust in NGC2 is an inherent, therefore, trust in the agents and the AI that we're using? Or do you think those things are still separated?
No, trust has to be there. And I'll give you an example of how this is going to evolve. Today, just using drones, since that's kind of the coin of the realm, most places you go, it's one operator, one drone. And it's a physical manual thing in which that operator is managing and flying and physically launching and recovering and executing the mission of that one drone. We are experimenting with and right on the cusp of AI tools that will allow a single soldier to operate multiple drones, pre-program and operate multiple drones instead of just one-on-one. But when we have fully trusted and have brought on agentic AI tools that are out there, I could see where a single operator, it can be a surveillance or a reconnaissance mission, where we program a series, literally hundreds of drones that we create an infiltration box, and then you create a box for operating. And we give each one of those particular drones ahead of time a mission set. This is what I want you to go out and look for. And once you hit launch, they infiltrate along that route. They operate within that box of area of operation for whatever the period of time that's described through automatic target recognition tools that is pre-programmed ahead of time. Those drones know what they're looking for. Some are finders, some are spoofers, some are jammers, and some are killers. And the only time it reports back, and this may go away at some point too, is, okay, I have now done all the things you've asked me to do. I'm ready to affect a target that's out there. The human is back in the loop and says, yes, I agree, and it executes. Everything else in between there is done in an automated way through an agentic AI tool that rides on top of that. That can be translated into planning as well. The intelligence preparation of the battlefield, which is one of the steps in the military decision-making process. And it's hugely time and manpower intensive to go through the order of battle and come up with templates, doctrinal templates to situational templates that eventually become decision support templates that you can execute with. Here's where I think the enemy is going to be arrayed. Here's what I think the enemy is going to do. Whereas a fully realized and trusted agentic AI tool, because we know the vast majority of the adversaries that are out there, how many ships, planes, tanks, this, that, people, what their doctrine is, how they fight. We can apply that to the terrain that we're operating on. And within minutes instead of hours, it comes up with that situational template for the intelligence professional who, instead of spending 80% doing and 20% thinking, flips that on its head and now is spending 80% thinking and looking at what the AI tool gave him or her and saying, yeah, I agree with most of this, but I would put this icon here instead of there, and I would adjust this and put it over there. So you're doing more thinking than doing, and that's a planning example of how some of these agentic AI tools will help us.
I'm always attracted to these ideas of not putting people in harm's way as much. But someone was talking to me the other day about it and said they worry deeply about this idea because you end up with an idea of simply machines fighting machines, certainly in great bad competition. You see this a little bit in Ukraine, where you've got 10,000 drones in the air at any one moment, 5,000 drones from each side, effectively fighting each other. You've got uncrewed ground vehicles going in to conduct assaults. The risk to humans has gone. And they were saying to me, why wouldn't you do it? Because you're not imperiling anyone's life, and therefore your decision to go to war doesn't hold as much risk. Does that worry you in the land domain? That effectively by taking people out of the operation, by making it agentic, because it's trusted, because it makes decisions faster and better than humans, removing humans from it, this fundamentally changes what war is. It doesn't become about soldiers fighting. It doesn't become a human endeavor. It doesn't become something that we've known as how humans conducted war for millennia. It becomes something very different. And the decision to commit to that kind of action then changes markedly, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to sort through there. We saw an example of where we had a Russian formation literally surrender to a Ukrainian drone unit that's out there in the info space. And so I assume it to be true. But yeah, there's a lot of leaders talk about the nature of war and the changing character of war. The nature of war being static, lasts forever, never absorbs. I mean, that's kind of the thing that stays throughout time. The changing character of war, the subcomponents of that are who you fight, where do you fight, what do you fight with, and how do you fight. You can't really control the first two, who you fight and where you fight, because we're not very good at predicting the future and future conflicts. But what you fight with and how you fight doctrine and the technology that we're talking about right now, we absolutely control that. And putting it together in a meaningful way is what sets armies apart, how well they do that part of it. The nature of war, a political struggle fought violently with humans in a contest of wills. And to your exact point, Peter, is the will to fight for who, the how. Using the Russia example of the surrender to drones, when you take the human component out of it, and humans are fighting drones or robots and vice versa, what does that do to the will to fight? And I don't have the answer, because we all lived it. We saw Afghan fall within weeks, months, starting in the spring of 2022. And by August 13th, 14th, 2022, they had pretty much taken over all of Kabul without a shot. And I can remember testifying before Congress, and I was asked, why didn't the Afghans have the will to fight? I was like, the Afghans can fight, and they have the will to fight. It's fight for what? And when their leader left and all the things happened, in the end, it was they were not going to fight for a government they didn't believe in. But when they believed in their family, their faith, their tribe, they would absolutely fight, because I fought side by side with them. Flip side of that, Ukraine, we couldn't predict, look at the will to fight there, a much more larger, more sophisticated, much more modern adversary. They've held out for 4+ years now. So it's the will to fight for what? And when you throw technology and some of these robots and drones in there, I don't know how that changes the calculus of will to fight from tactical all the way up to operational and strategic.
It's like one of the biggest questions that is vexing everyone I think I know at the moment, from philosophers to dentists, from engineers to architects. This question over what it's going to look like in the future is deeply disturbing. Jim, it has been a huge honor to have you on the show. On behalf of the audience, we're most grateful to you for sparing your time. Please enjoy your retirement. And again, thank you for your service. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Peter. And my parting shot as it relates to Next Gen C2, we have traditionally fielded a radio, fielded a weapon, fielded a helmet, fielded an end user device. Pick a component inside of all the sophistications of what goes on the average soldier. And then we figure out how to integrate it on the back end. In the future, from what we wear on our head to going from chest to soldier-borne mission command, i.e. putting that end user device on the face, to the weapon system that our soldiers carry, to how that communicates, all that has to be done in an integrated fashion, or we will fail our soldiers in the future that are out there. So I just encourage us to continue to push the envelope on there. But Peter, thanks for having me. It's been great, and I appreciate the conversation.
Systematic is trusted by more than 50 nations worldwide, including 18 NATO members. SitAware is an industry-leading command and control software suite that is cloud-enabled, edge-capable, and coalition-ready.
We hope you enjoyed the show. As well as telling your friends and colleagues about it, please do hit the like or subscribe buttons. This episode is produced by AureliusThinking.com as a show for the Wavell Room, the home of intellectual curiosity and challenging thinking for military professionals everywhere. Thanks for listening.